Hello, it is Kim, and I'm here with you live for Tuesday night live events that we do here on both Facebook and as a YouTube. And I'm here to answer your questions about health, life, whatever. Keto, low carb recipes, not recipes, health stuff, not health stuff. I don't know. Whatever you guys want to talk. Was that too general? That's probably too general. They tell you to be more specific, right? So that people know what they're getting in for when they join in. So, what do we want to talk about tonight? Well, I can talk about the fact that I've been reading studies all day long. So, that's what I've been doing today. I've been doing research on various projects, and there's been a lot of studies being read. And then at a certain point, I said, I need to stop doing this because I can't remember what any of them say right now. So I put them away, made my little spreadsheet with my notes. And then I was like, oh, it's time to get ready for the live. So here I am on the live waiting for anyone to have, one or another kinds of questions. What's my beverage of choice today? It's pretty standard, actually. I do sparkling water with some grapefruit citrus Zevia. So it's like half soda, half soda water. Because the Zevia is pretty sweet. I actually can drink them, but I like to stretch them out a little bit more and not have quite such a sweet beverage. That flavor of Zevia is very hard to find. I will tell you, I can get it at Sprouts or Amazon, and that's it. I can get all the flavors of Zevia other places, but that flavor is my very favorite. It's the grapefruit citrus. It's delightful. It is. I just don't get tired of it. Anyway, so that's what we got going on there. Who's taking their Christmas tree down? Everybody's Christmas tree down? Who still has it up? I think it very much depends. I don't think do people don't do real Christmas trees as much as they used to, for sure. They're the non-real ones, but the fake ones, that's the word, are much better quality than they used to be. And I can totally understand. And with the fake one, you can leave it up for a lot longer. You can put it up a lot earlier, you can leave it up a lot longer. We have a real one. Or we had a real one. We just took it down a few days ago. But why do we have a real one? A couple of reasons. I love the real ones. Also, we have nowhere to store a Christmas tree. Nowhere at all. Not a single. So because of we barely have room to store the stand. So because of that, we have to get a new one. Or a, you know, I guess we could get a fake one every year, but that seems wasteful. So anyway, the cats were depressed when you took yours down, Val. That's funny. Yeah, I don't have any cats, but I can imagine. I hear the cats really love the Christmas trees. Hey, rainy Arizona. It is still dry right now. We had a little sprinkle yesterday. We had heavy rain the day before, and it's going to start raining sometime tonight. So it's on and off rain here. Um, Nanu Pat, if testing proves that coffee or MCT oil raises my triglycerides, do you think I need to avoid it all the time? I think that's a really good question. Um, and one of the things that I think I would evaluate is how much is it raising your triglycerides? Um, if you find that it raises your triglycerides, um, above 100, or like within a reasonable amount of 100, I might look at if that's a good idea, because you don't necessarily want that. If you're like, well, when I have these things, they're 70 instead of 50, I think that's, for me, it's going to be a judgment call, person. I'd be like, well, that's still within the realm of reasonable. But one thing I will say is, if MCT is raising your triglycerides, I have a question here. It um you are getting your tests fasted, right? You don't mean it if you have a coffee the day of your test, it raises your triglycerides, because that would be normal to have happened, certainly with the MCT oil, because you're then trafficking in those triglycerides, right? In that short term period. But if you are fully fasted, if you mean overall, which it does for some people, raise their triglycerides and their LDL, and or I should say. So if you're if it, so To clarify, if it's the day of and you're like, "Hey, I had a cup of coffee with some MCT oil in it before I got my triglycerides tested and they were kind of high," I'd be like, "Yeah, I would expect them to be kind of high then." If you're saying, "No, I had to cut it out for weeks or week plus so that my triglycerides would come down after usually having my coffee and or MCT oil," then that is something where I would have to personally say, "Well, is it just a little higher than I would hope, or is it significantly higher than is indicated for good health?" And that I would look at. The other thing I would look at there is, how do you make your coffee? So some people do find that filtered coffee, um, is less impactful on their LDL and or their triglycerides. So made in a coffee maker with a paper filter, has to be paper. Um, that paper filters out a component of coffee that I can't remember what it's called. But I had a good friend of mine, Lisa, who moved from unfiltered coffee to filtered coffee. She was doing like press pot coffee. So it's like, it's not like she was drinking the grounds. It was filtered, but it was not filtered through paper. And her LDL got cut by 100 points just from making that change to doing coffee through a paper filter rather than the press pot. So, that's something to think about for some of us who might want to see those numbers go down. Bob Eldridge is joking about, I heard the new keto food for lowering LDL is Oreos. So those of you that don't know, if you've been living under a rock, I guess, the people, Dave Feldman and some of his cohort, have published a study. I think Nick Norowitz was primary on it, I think, where they showed that dosing themselves with Oreos lowered their LDL more than dosing themselves with statins. So that is an interesting feature of and it's not, and I know you're joking, Bob. It's not to say that Oreos are a health food. The study was to show that really the lipid management system, being an energy management system, means that there's a lot of impact based on our food choices. Um, Depending on what we might choose, can have a very different effect on our LDL, really, with a lot of the emphasis being put on, coming out of Dave's studies, that there's just a much different impact of someone who's trafficking in lipids, right? Somebody who's on a ketogenic diet, somebody who is using fat as their primary fuel source, being very different in terms of what our energy systems might look like, our management of our energy systems, like such as I just went in a circle. Our energy management systems, such as lipid, cholesterol levels. There you go. Nanu Pat, I was like, I'm about to say like a totally circular sentence. I find that if I eliminate them 3 days prior to the test, my triglycerides are in the 70s. If I have it up until the day before, it's over 100. Yeah, I mean, so the honest thing about a lot of these lipid issues is we don't necessarily know the mechanism, right? Or and if somebody does and I don't, then I'm happy about that somebody knows. But for a lot of these things, we can say cause and effect, we can see evidence, we can see when I do this, this is what happens, but we don't exactly know why a lot of these things are happening. Hey, Donna. And so, that's going to be a judgment call for you. Certainly, if I were getting triglycerides like in the 200s or something, I might be like, If it's like under 150, I'm going to go back and forth. But I would try the filtered thing. I don't know if that's going to impact them for you, but that might. And I don't know if you've tried coffee with or without MCT oil. The MCT oil generally is supposed to be sort of used by the body pretty quickly. So I wouldn't normally imagine that MCT oil would have that long lasting an effect on your triglycerides, but it's potentially there. And I would potentially, to say potentially many times, look at what does just coffee do with or without the MCT oil, and if that alone would be it. I'm a lot more addicted to my coffee than I am to my MCT oil, which I'm not addicted to at all. So, what else? Let's see. All right, what else is going on? Um, I th- I think I might have penciled in my eyebrows a little dark. They're pretty dark today. So I have a pretty solid eyebrow situation, but sometimes I go a little crazy with the darkening of them. Um, you notice these things when you're staring at yourself on a screen that you don't notice when you're standing in the bathroom. Um, all right, what else is going on out here in the land of you guys? Tell me. Pat says, I definitely need to test more. Right. Yeah, I was talking briefly with Dave Feldman today, and we were talking a bit about my brain. My brain. He did an experiment called the Ox LDL. Let me see if I can find it. Boop-a-doo. Hold on. It is called the OX LDL replication experiment on cholesterolcode.com. And that's cholesterol code. I think I spelled that right. Cholesterolcode.com, and you look for the OX LDL, OX LDL experiment, and it shows really interesting different patterns around eating and different ways his oxidized LDL levels change. So that was super interesting. So you can check that out if you would like to know more about that. Um, apparently, so that test he did like I think three different protocols on keto, um, hypercaloric, eucaloric, and hypocaloric. So what does that mean? That means in the caloric range, like overeating, eating in maintenance, and undereating compared to maintenance calories. So those were the three things that he looked at. Somebody has given me an angry face. I don't know why. I hate you guys. I am sensitive. Why the I don't know. Anyway, Diane says so decaf coffee is okay. Now, from what I understand, it's not so. Yes, decaf coffee is fine, but I don't know. A lot. Some people still, as far as I know, I don't react to coffee. So, I don't always recall, but I believe the issue persists that coffee can raise triglycerides in decaf coffee. It's not the caffeine causing it. It's some of the other compounds that are in coffee. And so same issues will potentially happen with decaf. I don't think decaf's a bad idea. I had a decaf coffee late last night. I just do decaf when it's later in the afternoon. It doesn't keep coffee doesn't keep me up, but Andrew, no, who? What's his name? He's blonde. He wrote a book about sleep, and my brain I was like, Andrew Huberman got stuck in my head, and that's not who it is. It's Matthew Walker. Matthew Walker says, even if you don't think it's keeping you from sleep, it might be affecting your sleep quality. So since he said that, I try and not have try and not have full calf in the afternoon to evening. So I wanted a coffee last night, so I had a decaf. Beck, no, this round we don't have a Facebook group for the Unstuck. It just wasn't being utilized properly, and then it was a management issue. Nan, do not apologize, Pat. That maybe people makes them angry. I'm just oversensitive. Um, yeah, Dave Feldman, absolutely amazing. What am I getting? Uh-oh. Debbie's freezing in Santa Clara. Debbie, don't tell the people outside of California that we are freezing because we don't get to say those things because freezing for us is 40 degrees and freezing for other people is apparently 0 degrees. And I would rather be in the 40-degree weather. But yes, it is indeed a little chilly when the sun goes away. Slightly chilled, I would say, really. I always say, like, that's right. I've lived in a couple of different places in the world, and there's a particular kind of cold that happens in the Bay Area, and nobody has any sympathy for us. But I think it's because it's foggy, and there's a certain type of cold that we're just not prepared for, and it sort of feels like somebody's walking around behind you and like dripping like cold water down like the back of your shirt. So you're feeling like a little cold. I'm just a little cold. But then there are other places where it feels like someone's beating you with chains. There's a wide range of discomfort, and so that we're not there, but it is uncomfortable chill. Anyway, I try and have these things in perspective. Um, Jennifer says, "Do you use exogenous ketones?" I have at times experimented with exogenous ketones. Um, I've experimented with salts, ketone salts, and ketone esters. And what I've experimented with more is actually precursors to esters. So there are certain types of compounds. I don't know what they call them. I mean, I think they call them exogenous ketones, but rather than directly be a exogenous ketone, that it's not like I'm drinking. Here's what it is. I'm not drinking beta hydroxybutyrate, and I'm not drinking the ketone. I'm drinking something that creates extra beta hydroxybutyrate in my liver, and so it's like one stage before, and then so when you metabolize it, it metabolizes into ketones. And so one of the I think I explained that right. I'm not a ketone scientist. Like I don't make the ketone. I'm not tinkering in the lab making ketones. But anyway, there's a brand called thank you say human. It's HVMN and they make a little drinky that is this stuff that I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, and it is one of the reasons they do that instead of produce they used to make an ester, this a human human I don't know how to say it, but this company they used to make the esters directly. They were much more expensive and tasted much more terrible. So this version doesn't taste as bad and is less expensive and very effective. And so if I were going to be taking some type of ketone product on the regular, that's probably what I would stick with. Um, I don't have any issues that I think it's worth the cost. So like I don't have some of you might disagree. I don't have cognitive decline issues. I'm not suffering from a recent like head trauma. I don't have cancer. I don't have I'm not a maybe a high level athlete, right? So the functionality that I might use those exogenous ketones for, not there. So I've experimented with them to see if I get an effect. The actually my boyfriend Eric finds more use for them than I do. When he's on a hike, he'll take some on his way home, and so that sometimes is useful for him. Oh, there's a company called Kinetic with a K, and they make little like drinks that have some of these precursors in them, and those are pretty tasty. So either of those two companies would probably be who I would stick with on those. Um, I can't support anything Prove It does because I think they're a terrible company. Um, ketone salts, though, I think possibly could be useful. I think Dominic DeAgostino out of UC South, not UC, University of South Florida, um, and his wife Chilla, I think it's Chilla, make something. I think it's called Audacious. I think, and it's a ketone salt. So if I were going to do a ketone salt, because ketones have to bind to something, so you've got a salt is one way to deliver those. I would look into their product, um, but exogenous ketones do not cause weight loss. Exogenous, just repeat after me. Exogenous ketones don't cause weight loss. Again, everybody, for the people in the back, right? So, anyone who's trying to sell you ketones with the idea that they directly lead to, like taking in ketones rather than making them, right? When you make ketones from your body fat, let me be specific. When you are making ketones from your own body fat, you're using your own body fat, you're using energy to do so, and it will have a positive effect on your weight loss. Um, as long as you're not making those from your dietary fat. If you're making them from your dietary fat, like the fat you eat, then it probably will become neutral in terms of energy used. But the making of ketones does use some energy, and so that they could be beneficial. But no, if you take them, they might provide energy to your brain. They're an energy intake, right? But they won't cause higher ketones don't mean more weight loss, especially in the fed state and or the ingested of ketone state. So I don't know, Jennifer, if you had a more specific question, but I just rambled about the topic for a while. So hopefully that covered what you might have wanted asked. Um, Debbie says, I could drink coffee and go straight to bed. Yep, me and my mom, my 80 something year old mom, also could. We can drink coffee and just head straight on to bed and not notice any problem. And I am only listening to this advice because I'm like, well, maybe the like maybe my deep sleep isn't as good, maybe the quality isn't as good. And I have noticed, and I think this is perimenopause. I think this is hormonal, not related to caffeine, and it doesn't matter if I've had caffeine recently or had caffeine. My sleep quality is not as good as it used to be. I do notice that in the past few years, I will wake up in the middle of the night, and I never did that before. Not every night, but I'll go through like stints of it, and I think that's hormonal. But I'm like, let me not add anything to my plate that might increase such behaviors. Anyway, um, hey Nicole, good to see ya. Oh, Beck, yes, in Australia, it's the summer, right? So heat wave there. Donna, coldest temp I ever experienced was -36. That is not appropriate. That is not appropriate for being alive. That is no, I am not willing. I'm not willing to do it. Just no, no. That's what I have to say. I don't love the cold. I have Renaults, you guys. Look at my spindly, I mean, they're giant hands. Look, they're like bigger than my face. But I have very, compared to my palm size, very skinny fingers. That's not why. It's genetic. I have something called Renaults. You guys know Renaults? It's when your little blood capillaries and everything, your little fingies and your toes, they don't do very well. They're not fit, really. Unfit. It's a genetic kind of thing. A lot of people with might get Raynaud's along with other autoimmune issues. Sometimes it's by itself, and it just so if your hands get cold, they turn white, and you can't get any blood into them, and they hurt. And then when the blood comes back into them, they turn bright red, and then they hurt. So they just don't do well with temperature regulation. So that's my excuse for living in California. I pay for it with the property values here. Anyway, that not the value part, but how much you have to pay to live here. Yes, Donna, agreed. Not appropriate, inappropriate. That is insulting weather. Anyway, Bob says that's why I have no desire to do an ice bath. Yeah, if I did an ice bath, I don't know that my fingers and toes would recover for days on end. I won't be gross. I was gonna be gross. I was gonna, because when it gets real bad, you can imagine what happens when your fingers and toes don't have proper circulation and bad things happen, like your skin wants to die. It's not good. So, so yeah, not trying to push the envelope on that one. I also have strange things that I don't like being cold. What else? What else would people like me to talk about? Um, my weight loss is going well. Uh, I'm happy with the results so far. So I can catch you up on that. Over many years, right? I lost a lot of weight on keto. Keto stalled, went to more of a high protein, moderate fat approach, lost more weight, maintained that for quite some time. Last year, had a very not great mental year. Couldn't lose, decided I wanted to lose a little more weight, couldn't manage to do it. Felt like I was trying to walk on broken legs, got kind of depressed about it. Um, and then I was like, okay, I need to do a reverse diet. That's what I have to do. Was not in the right headspace to do it. Intentionally put on some weight to try and see if I could bump up my metabolic rate a little bit to be at a better caloric intake for my next cut. It was just a bit of a disaster in there. So at the end of 2023 began another cut. A cut is just a period of intentional weight loss. That's what it is. I don't like the word diet, even though that's what a lot of people would call that, because what we eat is our diet, right? You're on a keto diet or a low carb diet or whatever. I don't like to, even though sometimes I do, I don't like to confuse the topics of your diet with trying to lose weight, because Not everyone should be trying to lose weight all the time. Anyway, so a cut is a specific period of time when you're trying to lose weight. And that's what I've been doing since late 23. And I'm down just under 10 pounds at this point, feeling pretty good about that. Looking for maybe about another 10 before I exit this phase. And with that, it will be, you know, we'll see how I feel when I get there. Every time I set a goal, I'm like, that'll be good. And then I get there and I'm like, but I do like this thing happening. Anyway, so what am I doing to accomplish that? I am doing twice a week at the gym. Most of that time is focused on, really, other than warming up, all of that time is focused on lifting weights or resistance training of some kind. And then I go for walks. So I try to get 8 to 10,000 steps a day. I don't always get it, just be perfectly honest. If it's raining, no, not going to do it. Um, but then it does, but it doesn't rain here enough that that's really a big deal. If it did, I'd have alternate plans. I hope. Um, but that's not the primary driver. But that's like trying to, because when you lose weight, you want to lose mostly body fat. And when you try and lose weight without resistance training, you lose quite a bit of muscle mass as you're losing that weight. But when you resistance train while you're trying to lose weight, you will lose less muscle mass and more body fat. And so that's what I'm focused on with my workouts, not trying to burn so many amounts of energy during my workout or anything like that. I'm just trying to retain some muscle mass. And then I'm in a caloric deficit and I'm eating what I would call somewhere in the low carb territory, not ketogenic at this point. Um, why is that? Not because I think there's a reason not to do keto. It's because I follow my hunger, and my hunger tells me it likes vegetables now. And I've always liked vegetables from the taste and flavor, but I find vegetables very satiating compared to other foods. And so I eat more vegetables and I feel more satiated and I feel less crazy when I'm trying to be in a deficit and get the appropriate amount of energy in my body. So I eat a fairly good number of vegetables, a little bit of fruit, and I eat a lot of protein and I eat some fat. And that's just what, you got to find what works for you. In my early days, I did a very high fat ketogenic diet. Then I moved to more of a high protein. So just boom, boom, boom over the course of just made adjustments depending on what my body responded well to. And that's how it goes. So feeling motivated, feeling positive, feeling happy about all the things that are going on in my life right now, anyway. BJ says, I will ramble until somebody asks a question. I'll tell you. I am a younger child. I can fill the void. BJ says, I have the same issue with MCT oil. It raises my triglycerides over 200. Also, Chris Bear with Keto Chow found that MCT raises his triglycerides. Yeah. So to Pat, maybe cut out the MCT oil and see what's going on there. Janelle, what's the best way to get rid of visceral fat? Okay, great. So we all have different fat stores in our body, right? We've got adipose tissue. We got adipose fat. That's the fat. That's the fat, I don't know, that you can squeeze and jiggle, right? That's on the outside of your body. Then we've got, which is more storage. It is still an endocrine organ. So having that kind of fat is causing hormonal repercussions. But the very dangerous type of body fat is visceral fat, which is fat within our organs and around our organs. And so we want to have a low amount of that visceral fat, like fatty liver is an example of fat in your liver, right? Is visceral fat. So we want to, you won't eliminate it completely, but close to eliminate visceral fat. The good news is for a lot of people, when they are getting more metabolically healthy, when they lower, their body fat overall, they will drop their visceral fat as well. But one of the things that I do believe really helps is as becoming more metabolically healthy through things like managing your blood sugars, ketogenic diet if that's appropriate for you in your stage, exercise. There has been some showing that the the first stage even of a ketogenic diet, going keto, being keto for some period of time, has a rapid result in visceral fat being targeted first. Generally speaking, I think our body during weight loss phases wants to target visceral fat early on because it is the most dangerous kind of fat to have. If you've been doing your way of eating for a long time and you still know you have very high levels of visceral fat, how would you know that, you might ask? They can do calculations based on things like DEXA scan, and you do want to pay attention. If it's still showing very high levels of visceral fat, you will want to maybe make some adjustments. Kind of depends where that fat is and what that effect is going to be. But yeah, it's absolutely what you want to target. But honestly, eating in a way that's puts your metabolic markers in a good range. So those are things like triglycerides, HDL, making sure that you are, dropping your blood pressure, doing the kinds of things that are going to show that you're having a more positive impact on your metabolic health, lowering your insulin. All those things are going to help target that fat. And then there's just got to be fat loss, right? I don't honestly know that you can be losing visceral fat without losing fat, right? Which is overall, you're going to be in a state where your body is dropping off the things you don't need. The extra adipose will come with it. But I do believe that when we eat in a way that makes us more metabolically healthy in a hypocaloric fashion, we will target some of that visceral fat as well. So eating healthy, not eating the wrong kinds of foods, eating in a way that causes you to lose weight overall. There are some things like with nutrient deficiencies, there are certain things like choline can be really important. If you're low on choline, your liver may store more fat. So making sure you're not suffering from nutrient deficiencies can also be of benefit. But generally speaking, I would say change your way of eating so that you're seeing fat loss overall, and visceral fat will be targeted in that process. Um, do I see somebody losing a lot, like all the visceral fat they need to lose while still having a ton of body fat? Probably not. They're going to go along that. Sherry, I don't know the answer to that question about shrinking an aneurysm. Not a doctor here, not a doctor, health coach, not doctor. And that is definitely something I would take to somebody who probably has some type of medical degree. Um, all right, you're welcome, Catherine. Happy to share those kinds of things. What else is happening? I'm thinking. Oh, more and more doctors are really recommending that it doesn't matter if you eat before getting your blood tests, right? Now you've got a blood panel coming up, go get your blood tests. Your doctor might order those for you, and they're like, you can eat before, you don't have to be fasted, which is, so you can go in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can have had breakfast, whatever, it's fine. It's not fine. It's not fine. We're finding that having eaten recently ish, the day of less than 8 hours or 12 hours, has impact and is going to make your numbers look a little screwy, and it's going to make your numbers look a little screwy in a way that makes it harder for you to tell if you have issues that you need to pay attention to. So just putting it out there that fasted fasted tests, do those. Kelly says my doctor says um to take vitamin C with an iron pill. So yes, vitamin C taken with iron, very beneficial. If you're asking about which brand is best, I just have general recommendations. I think Thorn or Momentous, or Pure Encapsulations. I think they always sound like they always remind me of Pure Romance. I'm like, no, that's not right. Pure Encapsulations. I hear those are all third party tested and well respected brands. Catherine, I feel like Catherine says, I feel like many health coaches want to push one size fits all instead of find what fits for you. I'm definitely find what fits for you, because one size does not even fit me all the way along my journey. One size only fits me for a little while. I am many people. I am multitudes. Anyway, um, Brooklyn, how do I feel about fasting? Um, does this help? Sorry, I'm reading two at the same time. It's confusing me. Um, how do I feel about fasting? Does this help with weight loss and does it harm your metabolism? Okay, good question. How do I feel about fasting? I think it's overused. Um, I think that is a time and a place for fasting for a lot of people, but not all people. I don't think fasting is a requirement for weight loss. I also think that there are potential downsides to fasting that I don't think we talk about enough. I think that if you are a postmenopausal woman, I'm especially cautious about it. I am more cautious about it the leaner you are. I think if you're super lean, you should not fast often. Now, if it's like for religious purposes or specific things you're doing very rarely, your body can handle whatever. Any person who is reasonably healthy can handle a 3-day fast a year, right? Now, will you still want to do one? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're like, it's a religious thing, I'm like, fine. But it's like, if you think that's doing you, more harm than good, you need to take the health part into consideration. So if somebody is doing a lot of fasting, and they think fasting is just the best thing in the world. Um, and they're already like not, they're now, they're no longer obese. They might be overweight, but not obese. I see a lot of people, maybe they go from the obese category to the overweight category and they can't budge into the weight range they want to be in. And so they start pushing harder and harder on the fasting pedal. And that's like, in my opinion, understandable, but also probably the worst approach you can take because you're like escalating, 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 eating less, eating less, eating less, getting less, not getting enough protein, not fueling that skeletal muscle. The more fasting you do, the more hard workouts you have to do, by the way, because you need to signal that muscle. So if you're like, I don't ever lift weights and I do a lot of fasting, I am worried about you. So especially if you're a postmenopausal woman, you can't afford to lose that kind of muscle mass. And when you're water fasting, you're going to be in a place where you're at a higher potential risk for losing that lean mass. So that's my concern about it. Do I think people can safely fast? Yes. Do I think people who are doing it with smart parameters? Yes. Do I think people who are like paying attention to the fact that you have to lift a lot of weights around it? Yes. So there are things you could do, but the way I see it out there, looking out there, the way I see it being done out there in the world or recommended out there in the world, or people telling you that fasting increases your growth hormone, so it's going to build muscle for you, even if you're eating no protein, I'm like, that's danger territory. So, you know, hopefully, hopefully that gives you some of what I think about fasting. Let me see if I answered that question completely. Um, can fasting help with weight loss? Yes. It is a form of restricting your energy intake, and that is how often you will see weight loss. But I also see a lot of people out there in the world. I know this is probably some of you'll be like, I don't like what you're saying. Um, I see a lot of people out there sort of using fasting as a form of an eating disorder, right? Like maybe you're like, um, I like to fast so that I can eat as much as I want on other days, and I just eat all day long, right? Like, I'm not saying everybody's doing that, but it's like, let's just maybe we should get a handle on what you're eating, you know? And so food is fuel. Humans only get energy from food, and we only get nutrients from food. I mean, sun, but no, we can't get everything we need from the sun, right? So we're not plants. We don't photosynthesize. So if we're not eating a lot, if we're not taking in nutrients, then where are we run risks that I don't love for everybody. So can fasting work for some people? Yes, if intelligently done. Do I think fasting is overused? Yes. Um, what for says, how will it affect the test if you go over 14 hours? Right, it's also a bad idea. So you want to be fasted between 12 to 14 hours is probably the sweet spot. You want to aim for about 12. If you go too far in the other direction, it can start to do things like raise LDL and make things look a little bit off. So we want to, and consistency matters test to test. So if you pick the number 12, we're going to stay within, 12, 13, 13, 12, like right around that range. Then each time you test, you're in a similar scenario, right? And so that's going to help with consistency. Um, Catherine says, I heard that postmenopausal women should not exercise late afternoon or evening. Yeah, it's probably somehow related to, I'm going to guess it's related to cortisol. I don't know that I think it's anything you need to worry about. I really don't like the idea of restricting people's exercise. Like, there's a lot of people out there who will say things like, the optimum time to exercise is XYZ. But it's like, and then if you're like, people use that as an excuse. They'll be like, yeah, I can't exercise then, so I might as well not do it because it's not optimal. It's like, no, I mean, I think exercising is fine any time of day. Maybe not right before bed. You want to give yourself a little buffer before bed so you can have time for that cortisol to come down, relax a little bit before you go to bed. You don't want your body temperature too, hot before you need the cool down time. So give yourself a couple hours before you go to bed. But otherwise, I'm sure there's something behind it for somebody somewhere, but I don't think that's enough to say. Like if you're like, "Hey, I can work out in the morning and that'll work for me." Okay, but if the afternoon or the evening is the only time you as a post or anyone listening to it who is postmenopausal can work out, I don't see why not to do that. I can't think of a good reason that would be that no workout would be better than an afternoon workout. Um Diane says, I thought fasting. Oh, okay. I thought fasting helped with reducing liver glycogen to lower blood sugar, especially in the morning. So I believe in fasting while you're sleeping. So just so we weren't clear, I think of fasting as different than time restricted eating. Okay. So if you're eating some number of meals during the day, but maybe you keep it in a window and then you stop eating at a certain time and then you don't start eating again until a certain time, I think that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. I mean, yes, it is technically true that you're fasting when you're not eating, but I don't consider that like overall fasting. I call that maybe time restricted eating. And so that totally fine for really almost everybody. How you set that window is going to vary from person to person. Um, so yes, having an overnight fast where maybe you don't eat late at night, you cut your fasting window at night, your non-eating window starts maybe earlier, maybe sundown time or so, and then you fast through the morning. That will have positive impact on your morning blood sugar for sure. And fasting indeed does lower liver glycogen, but we replenish glycogen. So you don't want to necessarily have constantly low liver glycogen because we store glycogen in our liver. You don't need to overfill anything, right? But um, and I'm trying to see how to best way to answer this. So it will, if you have reduced your liver glycogen, you will end up with lower glucose numbers at that time. But that's just sort of part of that nightly fast routine. I can tell you things like they found that a lot of people who do OMAD instead of 2 or 3 minutes there, I remember reading a study. I shouldn't say a lot of people. I remember reading a study where people who ate more than one meal a day had lower fasting blood sugars than people who ate only one meal a day. I don't remember though if that meal was an evening meal or a morning meal. And so if it was an evening meal, that would kind of make sense, right? More food closer to bedtime was still being processed in the morning. So anyway, um, if you are somebody that struggles with generally high blood sugars, your food choices are going to matter for sure. Which kinds of foods you're choosing to eat going to matter for sure. And you don't want to overfeed yourself. You don't want to be eating constantly through the day. You want to stick to discrete meals. So meals, not snacks, right? And you want to have a nice overnight period of rest from eating, of digestive rest. So you want all those things, and they're going to definitely help with reduction of stores of glucose in your body for sure. But, one of the things that's going to happen, right? If you're fasting for long periods of time, your body's going to be engaging in gluconeogenesis, so you don't die, okay? Because you need sources of glucose, and so we're the the body has methods to make sure you're getting the kinds of things that you need. You just need to make sure you're taking care of your body in such a way that it's not getting the things it doesn't need. And that's why I'm saying, like, if you are somebody that struggles with certain types of health issues and you have a certain level of obesity, potentially more fasting might be of benefit. But ultimately, I think um, we always need to be looking at long term, what is the optimal way to train myself to live healthy and eat healthy rather than relying on not eating because we don't trust ourselves in our eating strategies. Um, I had a question. Janelle says, "Do I have a macro recommendation?" I would say that I don't think it says the typical key macros are 75% fat, 20% protein, and 5% carbs. And I would say I don't recommend percentages. So what I recommend, because we all right, because okay, if you eat 1,000 calories a day, the amount of protein you're getting at 20% protein, 20% of, let's see, 1,000, 20% is you're getting like 40, am I right? You're getting like 40 grams of protein. Did I do that math right? Whereas if you're eating 2,000, now you're getting 80, you're getting twice as much, right? So grams, I think, matter more than percentages. So what I always say is start with knowing what kind of carb tolerance you have. If you want to be in ketosis, somewhere between, say, 20 and 30 total grams of carbs a day is probably going to get most people there. And then, or less, there's no requirement. And then we'd look at how much protein does your body need. Generally, that's about 1.6 grams per kilogram of your reference body weight. So you can just say your goal weight. It might be wrong, but it's ballpark. So let's say, 1.6. So those of you that don't speak kilograms, that means take your reference body weight. So if you're like, I should probably healthily weigh 150 pounds and multiply that by about 0.73. Go for 0.75 if you want, but 1.6 kilograms 1.6 grams per kilogram is the equivalent of 0.7272727 grams per pound. And so I'd multiply that, and then how much fat you want to eat is going to fill in the rest in terms of what you need energetically to feel good, function well. Certainly never want to go too low on a ketogenic diet. You'll have vitamin and nutrient deficiencies. Your fat soluble vitamins won't do well, and you'll just be way under eating. But I don't have a specific number for you, right? Because that's going to vary from person to person. If you're super active, athletic, already pretty lean, that number is going to be pretty high in terms of how much fat you need. If you're very overweight, very sedentary, not in a good health status, it might be a little lower. So it's going to vary from there. And that's where, you got to see what works best for your body and then what gets the outcomes that you want. Um, Diana, okay, I answered that one. What for? So would a diabetic who is trying to eat under 20 grams a day, okay, why would somebody who's diabetic and eating under 20 grams of carbs a day still have higher glucose readings? Why is it? Because the liver is releasing stores. So not really, to be perfectly honest. The liver can only release so much glucose. So when it's in the liver, it's glycogen. When they release it back at the bloodstream, it's glucose. So people who say, "Oh no, your liver is like dumping stored glycogen," not necessarily. What is usually going on more in the case where you're still seeing very high blood sugar levels in some individual who is eating very low carb, we know, right? The glucose is not going up due to ingested carbs. So, what other processes might be happening in the body? So, generally speaking, gluconeogenesis, the creating of new glucose, is driven by our body needing more glucose. But with certain issues, which is a good thing, but with certain conditions such as advanced insulin resistance, we can have a thing where basically glucagon, which is the opposing hormone from insulin, so those are supposed to oppose each other. So, but when you're very insulin resistant, sometimes we can produce glucagon when we shouldn't be in a state. We like higher insulin should suppress that glucagon, which should suppress excessive gluconeogenesis because our body's saying, hey, there's plenty of glucose here. We don't need to make more. But that mechanism can get a little bit broken. So a lot of times there is some temporary or permanent damage at the level of the pancreas that's causing us to overproduce glucose. So that can be what goes on there. One of the other things is that sometimes when we get to that advanced stage of insulin resistance at type 2 level, um, the beta cell function is reduced, and so that is an issue that we have to deal with. We just can't handle very much. Another thing we need to look at is cortisol levels and stress. Poor sleep can make our blood glucose rise, so it could be a lifestyle factor as well. So those are the kinds of things where you're going to want to do some more advanced testing of your blood labs. You're going to want to look into patterns. You might want to look at getting a CGM, so a CGM, continuous glucose monitor. What kinds of actions and activities are causing those numbers to rise? And then the other thing is to look at how long have you been on the ketogenic diet. It might take a couple of months for those blood glucose levels to get a little more in range. So a month of wearing a CGM would probably teach you a lot of good information and would be something worth doing. Sherry says, besides avocado, name some good fats. Sure. I think good fats would be butter. Um, I'm like, what? Olive oil is a good fat in a lot of ways. Avocado oil, but I think olive oil has a leg up, but avocado oil is certainly not a bad fat. Oh, you mean foods, high fat foods that are good. Beef, higher fat beef, great source of fats in that. Uh, Avocado, nuts. Um, Nuts are higher in omega 6s for sure, but so I don't recommend any high omega 6 uh, extruded fats like oils or anything, but in the nuts I think there's a mix that can be beneficial, and so you're not eating so many of them. That's not super concentrated source. So if you need more fats from your foods, high quality bacon, high quality beef, higher fat sources of beef. Oh, egg yolks, an excellent source of fat. Um, Coconut oil can be useful. You know, it's one of those things where it works for some people, doesn't work as well for others. But you said higher fat dairy can be beneficial for some people. So lots of places. Generally speaking, I don't add a ton of fat to my food, but you know, if I want a fattier meal, I'll do like a 85-15 ground beef instead of a leaner one. I might do a ribeye, which has a nice fat cap on it, you know, things like that. Very beneficial. So those are good choices if you're trying to be on a ketogenic diet and see how your body responds to getting those kinds of nutrients in. It's definitely very helpful sources for a lot of people. All right. I think that's good for the night. I hope everyone has a good Tuesday night, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.